sometimes even quite, colours that I don't love the look of have fabulous stories behind them, and the stories can sometimes make me just as happy as the appearance of the colour. So for me, that's my answer. I don't know whether Lucia has a very different one.
No, but it's strange, but today I'm black and white.
That is strange. We're talking about colour and you're both in monochrome. Welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm Carol Woolton, the voice of jewellery, an author, broadcaster, and the woman who initiated the role of jewellery editor at magazines like Tatler and British Vogue. This is a podcast for everyone, for people who do like jewellery, for people who don't realise they like jewellery, and anyone intrigued by fascinating facts, new ideas, and forgotten histories. So please join me as I tell sparkly tales, meeting all sorts of people, delving into 4 centuries of jewellery culture, and investigate what's happening now. Today, we're talking about the importance of colour. The purest and most thoughtful minds are those which love colour the most, wrote the Victorian artist and critic John Ruskin in 1851. Colours do provoke a conscious or subconscious reaction in us for no discernible reason. It's an emotional reaction. Who doesn't have a favourite colour? Colour translates to us as life, energy and passion. So it's hardly surprising after a year when life has felt so limited that we're all craving colour. I'm so delighted today to be joined by Kassia St Clair, who's the best-selling author of the book The Secret Lives of Colour. And also I'm joined by Lucia Silvestri, the creative director of Bulgari, known for so many years for their extraordinary colour combinations in stones. In particular, we're going to unravel the history of blue and why it's the world's most favourite colour. Lucia, thank you so much for joining us today from Rome. And Kassia St Clair, who's also in Rome, both of you, and I am in London. But thank you both so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
So we're here to talk about colour. And Bulgari's led the way with the use of numerous colour combinations. I know Paolo Bulgari famously said, diamonds are the common denominator of a jewel. But Lucia, it really is the coloured stones that's always the star of the Bulgari jewel, isn't it?
Yes, of course. And actually, I have to say that I love diamonds. We love diamonds because, of course, they are our best friends. But color gems are really the stars of our jewels. And for this reason, I have to say that our high jewelry the creativity starts from the gems. So for this reason, we say that the color gems are the stars of the jewels.
And is that driven by the colours in Italy? Is it driven by what you see around you? Because I know you've created a lot of collections around the architecture, the floral life, the colours.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes, exactly. And you know that Rome is full of colours, and we enjoy every morning the colours in Rome, starting from the sky, the monuments, the river, and the flowers, but especially the colors of the buildings, for me are really, really inspired. So it's very important. Yes, it's true.
I remember some years ago when I interviewed you for a big story in
Yes.
Vogue, and you said, without colour, I would die.
Exactly. I'm full of color, and I don't know if one of your question is which is my favorite stone, but I have to say that my favorite stone is sapphire, because sapphires can be all colors, and is a stone that represents the most my personality, full of colors. So I cannot live without colors.
Well, you had a special story about your first star sapphire, didn't you?
Yes. My special star sapphires, I bought it in Sri Lanka during one of my trips. And I was I was on vacation for 2 days in Sri Lanka, and I found this sapphire after I don't remember how many sapphires I saw, and I felt in love from the first sight when I saw the stone, and I fall in love also with the supplier. It was a really young boy, and it was so nice, so kind, that I said, I have to buy it, because the atmosphere was so incredible, the energy was so beautiful, and so I bought it, the sapphires.
And don't you carry that one with you every day?
Every day for I think now are more than 25 years or something like this.
It's amazing.
It's a love story.
And Kassia, now I want to ask you the same question. What made you fall in love with colour?
Yeah, so there's sort of two parts to that answer. The first part is that when I was a little girl, my mother was a florist, and I went to a London day school, and every day after school, I'd leave, I'd walk to her flower shop, and I would I'd play with the blooms that hadn't made it into the bouquets that day, the ones that were being tossed aside, and I'd make up little posies out of these blooms, and they would be quote unquote sold at the shop the next day. So I really enjoyed playing with colour, and that was very much part of my childhood, and I have these very vivid memories of being in the flower shop, and it was a flower shop in the 80s, so everything was big and bold and colourful. And the second part of my love for colour is more the kind of historical and the stories side of it. And that was when I was at university and I studied history, and more specifically, I studied the history of women's fashion in the 18th century and women's dress in the 18th century. And this was great fun. It meant reading diaries and letters and newspaper accounts of fabulous parties in the 18th century. And something that I spotted quite early on is that although we were talking, these accounts were written in English for the most part, and they were based in the city that I lived in, where I grew up and I was very familiar with, there was a colour language that was being used in these accounts that was very unfamiliar to me. They'd refer to colours that I had never heard of, and I'd have to go away and try and find visual references for what these colours look like. And sometimes you'd get lucky. You'd find reference to a portrait where someone said, I sat for so-and-so portraitist while wearing my gown of hair brown, with my white jonquil yellow pelisse or something like that, and you find the portrait, great, and then you have a visual reference for what those colours might be. But quite often you couldn't find a visual reference, and you're left with the written account and these colour terms that are mysterious and elusive. And I loved that. I loved that there were colours that were shared by a culture and shared in a moment that meant so much to these people, and yet had disappeared over time. It was ephemeral. It was like magic. And this just completely captured me, and I wanted to write about colours, both the colours that we recognise and know and love and have their place in art history and fashion, and jewellery, of course, but also these colours that are cultural moments that live for an instant and then disappear almost without trace.
I looked actually one time at some of the ledgers that were written about Marie Antoinette's dresses, and they refer to colours like dauphin, pou. And I mean, you can imagine how descriptive it was at the time, but as you say, it's not something that we'd recognise now. But psychologists obviously have long been fascinated by the impact of colour on the human psyche and what attracts people to a gemstone. And I wondered, Lucia, is it different? What attracts you to a gemstone personally, like your star sapphire, to when you're working and when you're choosing gemstones to create into a jewel? Is it different, or is it just the same instinct?
It's depend of the gem, and there are many things that attract me inside of the gems. I say that I have to feel the gem, and sometimes it's not only about color. Yes, first of all, it's a color, but there is a mixture of a color, clarity, and inclusions inside of the gems that for me are really the life inside of the gem, the word inside of the gem. And for me, it's very important, the color, of course, with this small, very smart inclusion inside that give the life of the color of the gem.
So I think you've told me before that you feel that life inside speaks to you.
Yes.
And so it kind of leaps out in a way.
Yeah, if I feel, it's a really strange relation between me and the gem. It's in fact, I don't say I see a gem, but I meet a gem, because for me it's really meeting not really a kind of person, because when I feel a gem I say buongiorno, because for me it's something that is alive, and from the psychologist point of view, it's something that feel me happy, make me happy.
Yes. So if you're in, say, you wake up, as we say in England, the wrong side of the bed, and you're in a bad mood, does that affect the gemstones that you buy that day?
But if personally, I have to say, if I'm in a bad mood, after 5 minutes that I meet a gem, I feel happy. I feel more quiet, more calm, more relaxed. I feel, or sometimes if the color is very strong, very vivid, I feel exciting. And I start with music and jams, and I start to play with the colors. It depends on the gems that I put on my table.
Well, I've seen you at your table at work. It's incredible.
Yes.
So many colour gemstones.
Today I was singing with this starting point of this bracelet. Is a bracelet with just a starting point. Is a sapphire, cabochon Ceylon sapphire, and Paraíba tourmalines. So this is made me very happy and a very good mood.
So what did you listen to while you were putting it together?
This morning I was listening Raffaella Carrà, I have to say. So it's just fun music.
So Kassia, we often talk about some colours that have got they're warm, some are cool. We automatically think of reds as warm, blues as cool. Are we right to think that?
I think yes and no. It's a very useful shorthand for us to be able to divide colour in this way, because today, if you're an English speaker and you talk to someone about warm colours and cool colours, they will automatically understand what you mean, more or less. But this hasn't always been the same throughout history. So there's evidence that in medieval Europe, blue was thought of as a warm or even a hot colour in some sources. So I think that's very interesting that the way that we look at colour is not necessarily how other people think about colour space. How they divide it up might not be the same. But I think for us, now it's a very useful distinction. It's another way of communicating through colour. As we just heard, colour can make people very happy. I'm a huge advocate. The more people talk about colour, the happier I am, and I think the happier they'll be. So the more means of communication and for understanding what we mean, that's a great thing to me. But this division isn't inherent or natural, because if you look at flames, hotter flames, some of them are blue. So it's not an inherent characteristic of colours that some are hot or cold.
So where did it come from, do you think?
Well, I think it really comes into its own in the 18th century. It really begins to gather pace as a kind of a talking point and a kind of well understood division in the 18th century. And I think it's when you particularly see it around the time of the Impressionists, when they start thinking about colour theory in a new way. They start dividing colour space in a more interesting way and using some of the more deeper scientific understanding of light to compose images that play off contrasts. And this idea of contrasts obviously feeds into warm and cool. So you start getting artists mixing together bright contrasts, both in the complementary colour wheel sense, but also in this sense of warm and cool. And it was just another way of them dividing colour space to create these contrasts.
So it's relatively modern, really.
Relatively, yeah.
And I'm interested that you've both focused on colour and happiness. And you say colour's fundamental to our experience of the world. So do you think that people who are in monochrome, all these fashionistas in black and monochrome, are unhappy inherently?
I mean, I'm wearing a black dress today. I think of black and white as colours, and I think they can bring as much joy. I mean, for me, of course, I think it's a bit different because it's not just the visual experience, it's also the stories behind them. And there are wonderful colour stories involving darker and sometimes even quite, colours that I don't love the look of have fabulous stories behind them, and the stories can sometimes make me just as happy as the appearance of the colour. So for me, that's my answer. I don't know whether Lucia has a very different one.
No, but it's strange, but today I'm black and white.
That is strange. We're talking about colour and you're both in monochrome.
No, I'm black and white, but the earrings, I always wear colour. Anyway, so I'm black and white, but you couldn't see, but I have earrings with the color green, brown diamond and tanzanite, so with colors. So for me, a touch of color is fundamental. But I think that black and white, I associate black and white pearls and onyx. So for me, they are colors. So anyway, they are colors.
Yes, I guess. And Coco Chanel used to say black has everything and so does white. They have everything.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
But I want to talk about blue in a bit more depth. In Japan, it's the colour of refined elegance and sophistication. And it seems that we've endlessly, from the time of the first human, been drawn to the colour of the sky and the heavens. But I know from reading your book, Kassia, that wasn't always the case. Blue was not traditionally a popular colour, was it?
No, so there was a very long period of time where in the West, blue wasn't very popular and had quite negative associations. It was associated with barbarism for a long time. If you look at very early Christian writers, they hardly mention blue. It's not very popular at all, and it doesn't have a big cultural place. But this suddenly changes when it becomes associated with the Virgin Mary. And as the cult of the Virgin Mary and her place within Christianity, grows and becomes more prominent, so this colour that is associated with her grows too. And you get the, very lush use of blue ultramarine pigments in paintings of the Virgin Mary. You quite often see these lovely paintings of her when she's wearing a blue cloak or a blue gown. Usually that's done with ultramarine pigment, and ultramarine was one of the most expensive pigments an artist could use. And so it was a way of patrons and artists of showing their devotion to the Virgin Mary by using this very expensive colour. And it was also a way of patrons of demonstrating their wealth. There are records of patrons drawing up contracts with artists to specify that a certain area of a painting had to be ultramarine, and even, talking about the quality. And sometimes the mistrust was so deep, or there was a fear that the artist would shortchange the patron. So you have these contracts in which it says that the patron will buy the raw ultramarine and kind of dish it out to the artists in increments to prevent there being an exchange for a cheaper, inferior pigment.
So this was about the 13th century?
Yes, the 13th century.
And so that was a sea change for blue?
Yes.
That it began to be popular?
Yes.
Because would you say now it's one of the most popular colours?
Yeah, I think in surveys that have been conducted since the Second World War in almost every continent and, both men and women, blue is almost always overwhelmingly the favourite. So its star has risen completely, and it's now kind of a really global favourite. It's very popular both with ordinary individuals. It's also very popular with brands and in marketing. Lots of companies use blue to try and gain these kind of positive associations. So it's now an incredibly popular colour.
Is that the same in gemstones, Lucia? I know in your latest Magnifica collection, I mean, we have those staggering Paraiba tourmalines, but often you have sapphires somewhere within your creations, don't you?
Yes, I can say that the sapphire, so the blue sapphire, can be definitely the Bulgari gem. Starting from my favorite jewels in the collection, in Bulgari Heritage Collection, it is the sapphire, Sugarloaf sapphire from Elizabeth Taylor necklace, Sautoir, and is a blue sapphire, Sugarloaf, so intense. So I told before that sapphire is my favorite stone, not only because there are many colors, but also because you can explore different kind of blue. And I love all the shadow of blue. And I remember when I started to work here in Bulgari and selected sapphires with Mr. Bulgari, one day he said, it was very excited about one sapphires, and he said, this is, I say in Italian, then I say in English, he said, questo è manto di Madonna, Virgin Mary's mantle, from a painting from Antonello da Messina. It's very, very famous painting, and this blue is a velvet blue, so intense, so warm, and every time that I see something similar, I say this is Manto di Madonna, that is very warm and soft blue. So there are different shapes. For this reason I love sapphire, because you can see different shadow of blue, different tones of blue, and they are so from a cold straight blue, or a very a little bit purplish, or a little bit gray. So there are different kind of blue. And I love the fact that you can see the difference between sapphire from Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Madagascar, and other countries.
So they have a slightly different variation in the blue from the different regions.
Yes, exactly.
And is there anything that you wouldn't mix blue with? Does blue go with every other gemstone, every other colour?
I love to mix blue with green. That is a typical Bulgari combination, blue sapphire and emerald. But I love also blue with pink. So we can match blue with so many colors. And also you can mix blue with Paraiba, for instance. And yes, it's a stone that you can mix quite easy with everything. Something that I don't like very much is blue and red together. But with diamond, so rubies, sapphires and diamond, I love it. But just red and blue, it's something that is too dark together.
Good excuse to get a few more diamonds in it.
Yes.
But Kassia, you describe in the book that, firstly, I thought there were more chapters in your book on blue than virtually any other colour, from the sort of cobalt, indigo, Prussian, Egyptian. Is that true? Is there more history around blue?
I'm not too sure if there's more history, but I can say that I wanted each chapter, the book is, The Secret Lives of Colour is broken down into various colour chapters. There's, a chapter on white, a chapter on black, a chapter on brown, pink, and so on and so forth. And when I was planning the book, I knew that I wanted each chapter to be roughly the same length, to have roughly the same numbers of colours within it, or shades within it. But some chapters were much easier to fill than others. And sometimes when I planned the book and I sent it off to the agent and we agreed a structure, and I'd start researching a particular shade, and maybe I'd plan to put it in yellow, for example, and I'd find it trying to sneak off into orange or brown, because when you look at the raw material, maybe it can be used in a different way, or maybe it's got a slightly different history to the one you think. And so sometimes colours were kind of sneaking off into other chapters. With blue, it was so easy to fill that chapter. There were so many great blue stories, and I could have gone on and included so many more shades. So blue was a very easy chapter for me to write. And for that reason, it was the very last one that I focused on. I did the book colour by colour, and I left blue till last because I knew I'd have no problem with it. So it was a nice treat for me to end on when I was kind of crawling to the finish line. Blue was there at the end waiting for me. As a nice, easy finish.
And you describe, maybe this is why blue is so fundamental to us, that as mammals we're hardwired to perceive light, and that blue is critical in that. Can you explain why?
Yes, so I think quite often when we talk about blue light now, people have a kind of negative reaction to it because we're used to hearing about it as a disruptor to sleep. But essentially blue light is... It naturally gives us a boost of attention and energy and so on and so forth. And it helps set our circadian rhythm, the time when we get up and when we go to sleep, and our natural cycle. Blue light is kind of fundamental to helping regulate that. And a study was done on blind mice, and even these blind animals were sensing blue light, and it was setting their daily rhythm, which I found completely fascinating. But of course, the negative side of that is if we're bombarded with blue light at the wrong time of day, at nighttime, just before we're about to go to sleep, we're looking at our phone screens or our computer screens and getting, hit with a lot of blue light. That is, setting us, it's disrupting our natural cycle. So that is sort of a downside of blue light. But really, as you said, it's something that is hardwired into us, and it is fundamental for our health and well-being.
And I was interested because you describe that blue light as electric blue. And I think this is exactly how one would describe the Paraiba tourmalines that Lucia chose for the Magnifica collection. Lucia, is that how you describe the Paraiba? Is it electric blue?
Electric blue mixed with green. It's not exactly blue. It's a mixture between blue and green. And electric, yes, for sure it's electric. It's something very special. And we are using this kind of color. And we are using Paraiba tourmalines, something that you can mix with blue. That is, I really just show the bracelet that we are studying. That is exactly the example of Paraiba, blue electric Paraiba with blue sapphire. That is something that we love and we not discover, but we love to create a new collection with this kind of combination. But I'd like to show you also something that I love, and is this kind of blue. Can you see or not?
I can see a blue sapphire coming my way. And it's
blue sapphire.
Oh, wow.
You see?
A very deep
beautiful
blue sapphire. Incredible.
Exactly.
And have you mixed that with enamel? Is that?
With turquoise.
With turquoise, I can see, yes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's gorgeous.
And just to show the different kinds of blue, fai vedere tutti e due. Two kinds of blue. One is more deep and one is more open color. You see the difference between the two blue?
Now you tell me I see the difference. I think it's very hard for lay people to see those minute differences that to you are very obvious in in colour.
You see that, just to show you how many kind of blue we can have in nature.
And then you use the other paler blues to bring that out.
Exactly.
To sort of frame the sapphire.
Exactly.
So what did you think when you saw those 5 huge Paribas tourmalines? What did you think when you saw them?
I was thinking about Sardinia Sea. Sardinia Sea is a blue, green, electric blue. And so immediately, I have the sketch here with the Paraiba. Yes, exactly. So I immediately thought that Sardinia Sea. And so I thought that we had to use all of them together, because you have the sensation to have the Sardinia Sea around the neck.
How nice. And for anyone listening, don't worry, I'm going to put all these images on the Instagram page and on our website, so you can have Sardinia Sea around your neck as well, in your imagination. But actually, Kassia, you describe it as you say that this electric blue is shorthand for modernity, and it's the colour of the future.
Yes, this is something that I found really interesting. I think when you look at sci-fi films and in popular culture, you quite often see electric blue coming up as kind of shorthand for the future in lots of different films and in popular culture. And I thought of that as being a fairly recent phenomenon. But when I look back, I saw that Victorians were also thinking about electric blue as being the colour of modernity, and people were wearing, electric blue gowns to balls to pose as electric light, and, this kind of idea of the future. And I found that really entrancing, that this was a colour that had retained a kind of a cultural weight for such a long time in the popular imagination. And, I think it's quite hard sometimes for things to be perceived as modern, because, if you're too closely associated with something modern at one time, sooner or later you're going to become antiquated. And yet electric blue seems to have escaped this fate and retained this idea of the future, something bright, maybe something a little bit intimidating and frightening sometimes as well, if we don't have that faith that we have the ability to control the future in a positive way.
So, having talked about the future blue, now if we can go back to the oldest blue, that from the ultramarine pigment, because that was created using the gemstone lapis lazuli, wasn't it, originally? Can you describe how they did that briefly?
Absolutely. So ultramarine pigment is manufactured, as you say, from this precious stone, lapis lazuli. Most of the ultramarine that you see in Western art, you can trace it back to a single mine, a single source that is in a very remote part of Afghanistan, the Sarasang mines. And the lapis lazuli would be taken up from the earth, brought up in great lumps of rock, put onto pack animals, camels and donkeys, and would find its way into the sort of network of trade routes that we now know as the Silk Roads, and would be traded, across these continents, and would eventually, some of it would eventually head west and make its way into Europe, usually through Venice. Venice it was sort of a principal port city, and a lot of Europe's ultramarine came from there in the form of lapis lazuli. Once it got there, it still had quite a way to go in order to make it onto painted surfaces. The stone had to be ground down into a powder, and it then had to be purified. When you look at a piece of lapis lazuli, it's not just pure blue. It quite often has occlusions in it, maybe some sparkling areas of iron pyrite, and then also some kind of whitish, almost look like clouds from various sort of deposits of minerals within the stone. You need to get these out if you want a pure blue pigment. So once it's all been ground down to a powder, it would then be mixed with various mastics and waxes to form a kind of doughy mixture. And this would then be kneaded similar to the way you might knead dough in a solution of lye. And while it's being kneaded, the small blue particles would fall out of this dough mixture and settle at the bottom of this lye solution. And the lye could then be tipped off and you'd be left with this bright blue sediment, and this could then be used as a pigment.
And this is what patrons and artists were fighting over because of its expense and because it showed you had the most luxurious colour that you could get.
Absolutely. It had come a long way. If you're buying it in Western Europe, it had come a long way. It had come all the way from Afghanistan and passed through multiple different hands along the way. And then also it had to be, it had this tortuous process to get it into a workable pigment. And so at some points in history, lapis lazuli, the ultramarine pigment, was more expensive than gold gram per gram.
So Lucia, are your clients ever driven to get the best stone they can that shows that it is a sort of prized treasure? So in the same way as these patrons who wanted to prove their wealth by having this luxurious ultramarine pigment, or are they more driven by the purest colour that they can find?
It depends on the culture of the client, and it depends. Sometimes we have clients that are looking for the purity and only the color. For them, it's important only the color, and without inclusions. So color has to be blue, pure blue. Sometimes, and I'm one of this, I prefer to have color, beautiful color, of course, vivid color, but with a mixture of something inside that show me that the stone is alive. So I love a little bit less color, less dark, but more happy color than dark color that sometimes is much more expensive. But I prefer, for my eye, I prefer to have something more happy, more brilliant, more vivid than dark and soft. So it's for clients is the same.
And so do you do a lot of education about colour when they come to see the stones?
We explain our suggestion, but we leave them free to decide, because it's important to feel the gem that you are buying, because it's something that you are buying for yourself or for your kids or forever. I don't know, but we give them the suggestion, but is different from, for instance, from diamonds. When you choose a color gem, it's really something subjective. So maybe something that I love, maybe you don't like. So it's something very personal. And we give our suggestion, but of course, they have to decide.
And in the same way that some of these artists use these coloured pigments, do you think that as a jewellery designer, you use colour in a similar way to artists?
In some way, yes, but it's. I think that it's also very natural. I mean, I don't think that it can be cold color with warm color. I just mix, and for me, a key word is harmony. So when I feel the harmony between the gems, between the colors, for me, it's a natural, a right combination. So for me, it's something that I feel in a natural way. But for me, the key word is really harmony.
But when I've watched you in your stone room and you're almost doing sort of washes of colour against a piece of paper, a design, to roughly see how those sort of colours work together. It's almost like in a palette of paint, really.
Yes, it's really similar. I feel like a painter, actually. I don't have a rule. I just feel the gems. I play with them. I play with colors. I play with different shadow of colors or completely different colors. But I feel like a painter because you saw my table and it's a table full of colors. Any kind of gem from turquoise to sapphire to rubies to emeralds. So any kind of colors.
And do you find that with some of your clients, there are fashions in colour? Do you feel that sometimes you're using particular, like at the moment, there seems to be quite a lot of Paraiba. Do you find that these come in waves of fashions, that people discover a new stone and then want to buy quite a lot of it?
So we would like to do the jewels to make jewels with our DNA, and so with our style we have our style, we have our combination of colors, but of course we follow a little bit the market and also the fashion moment. In this moment, Paraiba is one of the fashion gems that you can find in the market. And we use Paraiba in a Bulgari way. So we mix Paraiba with other gems. We don't use Paraiba, just Paraiba, but we use Paraiba with other gems. This is our way to use a kind of fashion gem. Did you see the Paraiba necklace? It's a mix with emeralds, for instance. So are two kind of bluish green with real green. So it is a Bulgari way to mix a Paraiba.
And Kassia wrote in her book about colour men in early history, bringing rare pigments from across the globe, making these extraordinary colours and coming along the Silk Road. And I thought that's really how, obviously, all the gems were traded at the same time, the emeralds, rubies coming over to Europe. Do you still rely on people to come and bring you stones, or do you prefer to get out on the road and go and travel and find them?
I prefer to travel and find the gems. And of course, we can have a special order from them. And from the moment you remember when you came to my room for the first time, mm-hmm. From that moment, we invited some special client to my room, and we discovered that very special clients prefer to come to my room and then at the store in Via Condotti, because they can play themselves with colors, with my guide, with my suggestions. So it's something that we can share, emotion. That when we create jewels, we create emotions. So when we are together, especially here in this room that you know very well, when we play with colors, we play with emotions. And this is something that is really important before to work with a finished product, before to have a jewels. We share emotion. And for me, emotion means also energy, good vibes. So it's a special moment with clients, yes.
So Kassia, do you, in your study, looking back through history, do you notice different colour fashions coming and going?
Absolutely. You definitely see trends for certain colours. I think Marie Antoinette was brought up in the conversation a little bit earlier. There was a really big trend in her day for a colour called puce, which is the French word for flea. This was flea colour. And it became so popular that there were various sub-colours. There was flea's back and flea's leg colour. And people were buying dresses and mantles and all sorts in this particular shade. A few years later, it disappeared and there hasn't really been a big trend for puce since then. There are other wonderful colours that kind of had their moment in medieval England, including goose turd green was bizarrely fashionable for a short period of time. Not the most appealing colour you would have thought, and yet people found beauty of some kind in it, and no doubt humour as well. I think humans, we are we like having a shared understanding, a cultural moment, and that can be in colour as with many other things. We enjoy sharing conversations about particular novels or particular films, and it's the same with colour. We can join around and have a moment around a shade, and it may not seem particularly appealing to generations that follow, but that doesn't matter to us if we find joy and a shared emotion around this shade. One of the colours that I talk about, and I'd give this example in the book, is avocado, that had this huge moment in the 1970s in interior decoration, and then hasn't really come back in the same way since, although now avocados are having another moment in a slightly, in a different guise with all the avocado toasts. But, as a colour in which to decorate your bathroom, it's just not, it's not there in the same way.
But you also describe how misleading the word avocado can be, because do you take the colour of the skin, the colour of the stone, the colour of the flesh? So do you think in some of our descriptions of colour we should be more specific? Absolutely not.
I think the roominess that colour language gives us is part of the charm. I love the fact that in the 1970s, people could say avocado and everyone else would know what they meant. And now that meaning is slightly lost. If we look at photographs, if we look at pictures, we'll get that sense back. But at the time, it existed as a shared understanding of what the colour was, of what it looked good with. And I think that's very important. And it's also natural. We need a shorthand conversation. It's the same thing with, millennial pink. When there are lots of different millennial pinks, but everyone understood what that shade was and what was generally meant by that colour description. So I think it's, I love that these things have their moments, and I enjoy the roominess and the this is the wrong term, but the grey area that you get with colour terminology. But, this was the argument in The Secret Lives of Colour. But then when I came to designing the book, I found myself in the slightly ridiculous position of having to pin down some of these looser colours, because we needed to have a visual aid for unfamiliar colours, and so each page has the relevant colour at the side. But you then have to pin down what is the colour of ultramarine, the one colour of ultramarine, or the one colour of emerald. And you find yourself in the ridiculous position of having to choose the perfect example, which was not my intention at all.
So do you feel there's a new colour around the corner that's going to be, say, our next season's colour?
Absolutely.
That will be popular?
Absolutely, and I can't wait to see what it is.
What do you think that will be?
At the moment, I'm very drawn to oranges and yellows in a way that I never have been before. And I've heard a lot of people during lockdown have talked to me more about yellows than I've ever been talked to about yellow before. A few years ago, people only wanted to talk to me about pink, and now it's all about yellow. So I feel that maybe it's yellow or orange, but who knows? And who knows what ridiculous name it'll have, but I can't wait to see.
And Lucia? Is there a gemstone colour that's been a bit forgotten that you want to rediscover, or a new stone on your table that you can't wait to use for the next collection?
I am talking about yellow and orange. I would say that I'd like to discover, I didn't do yet, I'd like to discover the best Patparacha sapphire. Do you know about Patparacha sapphire?
I do, but describe it to the listeners.
Okay. The Patparacha sapphire, that the meaning is the color of the sunset in Sinhalese. And is the color is a mixture, it's a perfect mixture between orange and pink. It's very, very rare. It's quite impossible to find the perfect gem. So I found it 2 months ago, and immediately we sold it. So I want to find another one because we sold too quickly. So I'd like to have another one and to create a special jewel with a Patparacha sapphire. And you know which the color was mixed the Patparacha, which color we used? We used violet. So patparacha, so pink and orange with violet sapphires. So what we made a special ring for a special client, but it was really, really amazing. And my dream is to find another one bigger than that and create a beautiful necklace. This is my dream.
Well, it sounds like you're both seeing the same colour around the corner. It's a sort of yellow, pinky, orange sunset. And that sounds really uplifting for the time we've had. And I can't wait to see it. And I can't wait to see what you're going to create with it, Lucia.
I hope so. I'm starting to look at for this gem. It's not easy because we found it 2 gems, but not beautiful enough. And so I'm waiting for the right one. But believe me, the color is really a sunset color. And especially here in Rome, if you put the stone, the real patparacha with the Roman sunset, they have the same color.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So we have the same sensation: yellow, orange, pink. Similar, Kassia.
Lucia, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy and that they have to whisk you off somewhere now. So I really want to thank you and thank you for sharing it with us. And it's been very interesting to talk to you and see your mood board behind you of all your people. And I see an old Vogue cover down there on, on the mood board. So that's really lovely to have a little peek at what's inspiring you.
Thank you, Carol. And I'm waiting for you in Rome. Huh?
I'm coming.
Please.
I'm coming.
Oh.
Kassia, thank you so much.
Not at all. And I also hope you manage to find that dream stone so that you can create your wonderful necklace and then I can admire it on Instagram, hopefully, or maybe even in the flesh.
That's brilliant.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you. And can't wait to hear more about your next book.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes of If Jewels Could Talk, please go to our website, carolwoolton.com/If Jewels Could Talk. And if you liked it, please share it any way you can. You'll find us on Instagram, and please subscribe to the podcast feed on any of the usual platforms where you find your podcasts, where we'd love a rating and a comment. Please join me again in 2 weeks for the next Jeweled Nugget, when I'll be talking about artists' jewellery. It may be the smallest testimony to their time, but is arguably the most intimate. Engraved pebbles, medallions and jewels. Very little known, but an important part of the artist's work. In particular, we'll be talking about a new exhibition at the Museo Picasso in Barcelona, and unravelling why Picasso pursued secrecy for these ornaments that he produced. Please join me then. Goodbye. If Jewels Could Talk with Carol Woolton is produced by Natasha Cowan, music and editing by Tim Thornton, graphics by Scott Bentley, illustration by Jordi Labanda, and you can find me on Instagram at Carol Woolton.